Hit record here. Make sure, oh, we're recording. So good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Preenon. I'm the Director of Communications for Hudson Gateway Association Realtors. Thank you all for coming to another Zoom breakfast with benefits. Hopefully we'll be getting back to doing this live, maybe by the fall, so we can also have some bagels and coffee together. At any rate, today's presentation is really exciting. I love color. I love talking about like different colors for rooms. We're going to learn all about what works well together. And I want to thank Wallauer for sponsoring this event. Wallauer has several locations throughout our area, and we'll hear from Laura from Wallauer a little bit later. I want to introduce to you today our presenter. Her name is Tony Jeremy, and she is architectural and design representative for the Benjamin Moore and Company paint company, and Wallauer does feature all Benjamin Moore paints. Tony is as I said, she's an architectural and design representative for Benjamin Moore, North America's favorite paint, color, and coatings brand. Tony works closely with architects and interior designers, providing them with the proper tools to navigate Benjamin Moore's extensive color library. Her services also include product specifications and continuing education courses. In addition, she hosts networking events to bring industry professionals together. She is currently a member of ASID, IIDA, IDS, PDCEA, IDAL, AIA, NKBA, and CSI. Wow, Tony, that's a lot going on there. I'm not sure what all those initials mean, but it sounds pretty darn important to me.
They're not anymore.
Tony, welcome, and thank you for presenting today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. And thank you for your attention, everybody. I really appreciate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do about an hour-long presentation. I expect that, or I hope that I will be able to answer some of your questions as I go along, but we're going to leave all questions to the end. So if you can just do us the solid of writing down whatever questions come to mind after I present, then Laura is going to do a quick presentation on Wallauer specifically, and then we'll go into questions. Please don't hesitate to ask your questions because we all learn from one another, okay? Even if I went over something, you might have missed it because we're going to be reviewing things pretty quickly. So just let us know whatever questions you've got, and I'll put an answer as best as I can out to the group. Okay, so that's auto. Can you guys see my screen? Yeah? Okay, great. All right, so today we're going to learn about color in the paint world, but specifically how that ties into staging with paint. When we talk about all the different elements and principles of design, color is actually the most important one because it's so in our face. Yes, you know, form and composition are all very important as well because it's the way that things fit inside of a room, but color is so predominant in our world and it bears so many different kind of symbolisms and emotional values that it's really important to understand color as best as you can, because no matter what you do, you're always going to be using it. Even if everything is white, there still is some semblance of color. So to review the color wheel, we're going to take a quick leap back to the first grade, but we're going to kind of expand on that information right here. So if you remember back to elementary school, all colors of substances like paint, all begin with your primary colors. Red, yellow, and blue. Those will always be the primaries of substances. When you mix two primaries together, you get a secondary. So yellow and blue will always make green. Yellow and red will always make orange. So you've got your three secondary colors. But when you mix one primary and one secondary, you get your tertiaries. So primary yellow and secondary orange will always make yellow orange. But it's important to remember that these are not just the only tertiaries. There are a lot more. You've got yellow orange, then you've got yellow yellow orange, then you've got yellow 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 orange. There's also orange yellow, orange orange yellow. So all of these different variations in between. And then when you look at yellow orange here on the chart, you can see that there are high chroma yellow oranges. There are very muted, very tonal yellow oranges. So this is why we kind of look at the color wheel and think that we see about 12 to 24 different colors, but really humans see more like 7 to 10 million different colors because of those lightness and darknesses and tonal versus very pure and pungent. So, but there's another question that I want to ask everybody here, and it's, what do you think that you get instead of mixing instead of mixing 2 of your primaries, if you mixed 3 of your primaries? So if I mixed yellow, red, and blue in equal amounts, I would get something different. I would get kind of a grayish, brownish, muddyish color. Some people call it black, some people call it gray. Just consider it like a mud, okay? So instead of mixing my 3 primaries, if I mixed my 3 secondaries instead, if I mixed orange, violet, and green in equal amounts, I would get what? Okay, this is what really trips people up, even if they were able to answer the first question. Well, I would get the same exact color, that brown, muddy, mucky sort of color, because essentially mixing my 3 secondaries is the same exact thing as mixing my 3 primaries, right? Because green is made from yellow and blue, therefore I'm mixing those 3 primaries. And likewise, if I mixed all of these different colors in equal amounts, I would get the same exact color. So what that tells me is that that color sits right here in the color wheel. And so if I had a red, like a cherry red, and I wanted to make it a little bit more like a brick red or a burnt kind of very tonal, very subdued red, in the paint world, in order to get there much faster, what would I add to it? Well, I mean, if I was in elementary school, I might grab my yellow, I might grab my blue, I might just grab the brown that's on the table. But when we're working with pigments in a paint store, what they would do is they would add whatever color is opposite on the color wheel. So red's complementary is green. Reds and greens, when used together, bring more activity to one another. But when they're mixed together, they actually make that brown, muddyish color that would sit right here in the center of the color wheel. So I would add green to red in order to make red more like a brick red. I would add red to green to make it go from a Kelly green into a kind of hunter green. So that's understanding the difference between those colors. So now where cherry red and Kelly green have nothing in common with one another, when I look at brick red and hunter green together, they have a lot more in common with one another because they have each other's attributes. And so you can actually match brick red and hunter green within a room together, whereas you really wouldn't do that so much, or you'd have to do that in differing amounts if you did that with the more pure colors. So I want to go back to that muddy color that sits in the center of the color wheel that is the commonality between all of these. Now, let's say I took a teaspoon of that mud and an entire cup of white. What would I get? Okay. Well, what I would get is a lighter version of it, right? So maybe known as grayish, or if it was a little more on the yellowish side, beige, okay? So what I'm trying to get to here is that the reason why everybody likes beige and grayish and gray is because they match everything. Now, why do they match everything? Well, now we know it took the 3 primary colors to make a muddy color. It's just a lightened version of it. So beige, grayish, and gray are actually related to every one of these colors, and therefore they will always match. Now, if you look at an actual Benjamin Moore color fan deck, you'll notice that there's 100 beiges and 50 grays and 200 grays. So we have to be able to offer a lot more than just gray that's made with black and white in the paint world. We have to be able to offer more undertones so that you can match that to whatever is going on in the room. If you're looking for a very clean gray, you might stay black and white. But if you're looking for a slightly more tonal warm gray to sort of match some of the orange accents or the yellow light bulbs throughout the space, then maybe a warmer gray that has a little bit more yellow or red or orange in it might actually be a little bit more appropriate for you. Some people want a blue, but they just want that blue to just have a light hint of blue, but it's got to have something else. So maybe a gray with a slight undertone of blue might be appropriate. So that's why we offer so many different colors in the paint world. And you're going to go into a Wallauer store and you're going to see an entire wall of 3,500 colors, and it's going to be completely overwhelming. But so a good rule of thumb is to stay away from the very vibrant colors that you see here on the color wheel and start with the more tonal colors, the more regular beiges, grays, and grays, and then start to tiptoe your way into color and see how that reacts in the space. So I usually like to go the opposite of the direction that any person, any homeowner or realtor would generally look at just walking into a paint store. So another really important question is going to be signified by that line. This is a question that I often ask my young designers to figure out what it is. But because you're a stager, this might help you out if the person who buys the house says, can you help me choose some colors for the dining room and the living room? But generally speaking, this is going to help you out in terms of pulling together what already exists in the home so that you can create good flow, okay? So generally, this line is going to mean, how do you want your house to feel, okay? It might not look like that to you right now, but what it signifies is the difference between your warm colors, your red, yellow, and orange, and your cool colors, your green, blues, and violets, okay? Now, each one of these has a completely sort of differing effect. Warm colors, like reds and yellows and oranges, are very invigorating. They increase our appetite, they increase our blood flow, they get our vital forces moving a little bit more, they spur conversation, they make us more excitable. And all of that kind of excitement actually creates more of a cozy feeling because people can come together in a more intimate way under the variations of warmer colors. But now cooler colors, on the other hand, instead of signifying fire and blazes, they signify the open ocean or an endless sky. So that's going to be a little bit more relaxing. It's going to lower your blood pressure. That's going to make a room feel more relaxing, a little bit more spa-like. Everything is going to recede back as opposed to everything advancing forward in a more cozy environment. Now, if you really take a close look at the color wheel here, blue is really the only purest of cool colors, because remember, that's your primary. Green, which is also a cool color, has yellow in it. So it is significantly warmer than blue. And violet has red in it, another warm color. So violet is significantly warmer also than blue. So blue is really where you're going to get your most coolness from, but still remember that the greens and violets can still add a little bit of a touch of warmth as well, depending on how much yellow or red are actually in them. And this is what that's going to look like. Okay, warm colors are going to advance onto you. They're going to make a room feel a little bit smaller. They don't shrink the walls, but they will make things feel cozier. Sometimes making a small dark room is a good idea to just make it or allow it to be a small dark room. And you don't necessarily need to do that with a really dark color, but you can do that with a warm color. Whereas cooler colors like the blue, they will make the walls recede. Everything will fade back. People will just feel like they can come in, just drop everything and forget about the entire day. So one is going to spur conversation and movement throughout the living room, into the dining room and into the kitchen. And the other one is going to be like, sit here, relax, unwind. So when you're designing for somebody, that's an important question to ask them is how does this room function and what do you want it to function as? How do you want to feel in it? But generally, you're going to be trying to make spaces feel a little bit larger in order to sell to the sales environment. So there's some basic color terminology that's good to understand. Again, here is that color wheel in the three-dimensional model that we just looked at. Instead of using the word color, you can use the word hue. It gives you a broader generalization of what you're talking about. So when you say, I think we should do this wall orange, that person is thinking orange. They're not thinking sherbet or a light pumpkin. They don't really have those variations in their head. So using hue is a more professional way of speaking to somebody about what colors to choose. Chroma can be found out here on where the purest of the color wheel actually stands. So that chroma is the amount of brightness, cleanness, pureness that a color has. A blue that just is made of blue. As you start to gravitate closer into the center of the color wheel, remember that center point where all of the colors meet up, you're becoming more tonal. You're adding orange to this blue to bring it into that more muddy, duller, more tonal variation of blue. Then you can tint to white to make it lighter. So there's where you've got all of your baby blues are going to sit in here. And then you can shade to go darker. This is where some of your navies are going to then exist. Okay, so again, thousands of variations of blue exist just within this three-dimensional model. So once you've figured out roughly what color what color you want to go with, what hue you want to go with, whether you're talking about warm colors or cool colors, depending on how you want that room to feel, now you can start to integrate color schemes. There's a variety of different color schemes. We're going to look at 4 of them right now. A monochromatic color scheme is one of those, and it's a very popular one. Mono meaning one, color, chroma meaning color. So here you see different values, lightnesses and darknesses, tints and shades of one hue, which is green, right? So you've got a very light valued warm green because it's got yellow on the top. On the bottom of the chair rail, you've got a medium valued cool green. Okay, you can see that this green has a little bit more blue in it than this green. So you've got warms versus cools, you've got light versus medium. And then the desk and the chair is a really deep green, almost black, that you really wouldn't notice unless you were really looking at it. So what a monochromatic color scheme is doing here is even though there's different tints and shades acting, and there's difference in warms and cools acting, just having one color actually keeps your eyes and your mind more still because your eye isn't bouncing around because there are no competing colors going on here. So it's a very subtle effect. These subtle effects are really good for when you're working with traditional homes. It's also really good for when you're working with really small rooms and you want to add some kind of life and some kind of variation, but you don't want it to be overwhelming and you don't want it to shrink the room. Okay, the more busy the room is, the more you're going to shrink it. So using tints and shades of one color is a really good way to do that. But you might not be working with greens because you're staging. You might just be working with beiges and grays. So considering different values, lightnesses and darknesses of that muddy, mucky color that we were talking about that sits right in the center of the color wheel, you can pair any color in the color wheel with this color and it will always work because it's made from everything. But here we've lightened it with so much white that now you've got a much lighter version of it. This beige is a little bit warmer than this. They're probably not exactly lighter and darker versions of one another, but you get the idea of how you're just using beige, like almost colorless colors, but yet you've added a whole degree of variation that has differentiated this hallway and stairwell in this house from the house next door that has the same exact floor plan. You've added more visual interest which adds a little bit more activity. And you've just created, more flow. And just by using repeat colors, it's really just a color that's repeating both here and also in the photographs. So remember that you can use a monochromatic color scheme in fairly colorless colors. Then we've got to jump towards complementary colors. Remember, complementary colors are opposite one another on the color wheel. It's a good rule of thumb to use kind of like 80% one color and 20% the other color when you're doing complementary color schemes, so that they don't necessarily overpower one another. But here you can see you've got a real dark valued high chroma orangey red. And then instead of a dark valued high chroma blue, we've used just a very lightened version of that blue. So a much higher value. So now the blue and the orange are not competing against one another. So one is definitely standing out as the focal point, and then the other one is just sort of helping make and add more visual interest to the room. And once again, just letting a small dark room be a small dark room sometimes really just makes it feel the way it's supposed to feel and function the way it's supposed to function. Here we've got the same exact colors. You might not think that it is, but you've basically got a much lighter version or tinted version of that reddish orangey color. So same color here, but just much lighter. So now that addition of white has made the room feel a little bit larger because there's more light reflecting around and it feels more airy. And then you've got the combination of the same exact blue, and you can see how they don't necessarily compete nearly as much. They just work really nicely. Generally, you're going to be working like this in most of the house if they want any color at all. But don't hesitate to give yourself one room, whether it's a guest room or a dining room, where you just really add some dramatic effect with color. Another color scheme that's very popular is analogous. This is probably the most popular one because you're working a lot with already pre-integrated elements. So it's any three colors that are side by side on the color wheel. It could be greens into blues. This could be greens into yellows, but depending on how that room functions is going to tell you which direction you might go. Being it's a bathroom, you want a spa-like airy feeling, you're going to play off of blue. If this was a kitchen and I wanted to inspire people to eat, I might go more greens into yellows. So finding out what that room functions as is also really important. So here they've done just that. Maybe they wanted a blue kitchen and you were like, well, how are we going to work a blue kitchen into here? Okay, it's not really the most appetizing color. So they've already got a yellow wood table, yellow wood floors, yellow wood countertops, and now you've got to integrate all of that. They want a blue kitchen. What's going to bridge the gap between yellow and blue other than green? There's nothing else. There's no other option. Okay, so you can have little accents of green. You can also pick up the job in the laundry room or the mud room and say, you know what's really going to help bridge those gaps is to be able to add some green into that room. So this is when you start to pick up more work for yourself. Another popular color scheme is a triadic color scheme. If I had a triangle in the middle of this color wheel, anywhere that the 3 points lined up, that's a triadic color scheme. Generally speaking, it's going to pretty much be your 3 primaries, 3 secondaries, or 3 tertiaries. You can sort of intermix them just a little bit, maybe make it more like a split complementary. But a good rule of thumb for this is using 60% one color, 30% another color, and then 10% of the last color. So here you've got just little touches of reds. You've got a giant blue room and then just a little yellow hallway. So what this does is this is a lot of color. So whether you used the more tonal versions of mustard red and mustard yellows and brick reds, you're creating a lot of variation in colors here. The more variation of colors you've got, the more your eye bounces around from spot to spot. So remember, the more your eye bounces around from spot to spot, the smaller a space starts to feel because it's very busy. Okay, so using softer colors and softer color schemes like a monochromatic or an analogous color scheme will prevent a space from looking too busy, too occupied, or too small. One good way of doing that, if they want the visual interest of something like a triadic color scheme, is consider lighter versions of your blue, lighter versions of your red. And you're not going to paint something yellow, but consider the fact that all the countertops and the shelves are a wood tone, and wood tones are a color that is already added into the room and needs to be taken into account. So here you sort of knock down the busyness of the triadic color scheme, even though you're looking at the same hues. They're just different values and just different tonal levels. And then where it really comes into play with you, because you might not necessarily be working with colors, you could go a year without working with color. You might just be working with off-white colors. And here Benjamin Moore itself has got 152 different off-whites. So when your customer only wants white, you've got a whole bunch of them to choose from. But once you lay them out, you want to view white colors on a white background. You want to view really dark colors on a really dark background. That's how you get a better understanding of what the undertones are. So your whites work the same way that colors do, just a much lighter version. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of warm yellow whites here. And then there's some bluish, grayish whites here. And then you've got your pinkish whites and more yellow whites and grayer whites. So you can really start to understand the undertones and then how you want to mix and match them. If you're using a very pinkish off-white, but then your white ceiling and your white trim has a bluish cast, now remember that those are going to be contrasting colors. You're going to bring more life to each one of them. But if I went with sort of a pinkish wall and then maybe a slight buttery yellow cast to my white trim, then those colors have more in common with one another. So they're not going to be blaring so much against one another. So people always say, like, what are your favorite whites? And honestly, my favorite white is always going to be what matches the rest of the room. So if they're just talking about the trim and doors, what other colors are a good variety? But for staging, you're probably going to have the painter just put one coat of white on everything. So staying maybe super white or decorator white, or what we're going to do is Laura and I and Wallauer are going to actually put something together, and we're going to send that out to you probably tomorrow or the next day, that gives you some of the most popular whites. And you could always go to a Wallauer store and talk to them about what white they think is going to be the best throughout the house. And a lot of times the consideration is going to be, how much lighting do you have in that house? Like what else is going on that they can work with? So other steps to your color selection process is going to be understanding the space, okay, room for room. You have to understand more house for house in the staging arena. How to set the mood. That's really good for interior design, but again, for staging, you kind of, again, have to integrate what already exists in the house and try to gravitate towards that style, but maybe also mute it a little bit. Like, let's say if you've got a house that's like all full on Mediterranean kitchen and flooring and molding and all of this stuff, you're not going to be able to repaint that house to look like a modern home. But you can choose colors and variations of colors to kind of tone down the really strong Mediterranean influence that's there, so that people can envision themselves in that home a little bit more. And then you're going to try your color samples, and that's something that I'm going to help you with in the future, and Laura can help you with in the future. And then you're going to purchase your paint, and Laura is going to help you out with that as well. So understanding how the space is used. If we're talking about a kitchen, is it a kitchen where they just cook and they get out, or they hang out in there all day long? Is it a laundry room? Is it a bedroom? And how do you, let's say, use that bedroom? So a nice big airy bedroom that's got a spa-like feeling, maybe they want to hang out in it a little bit. For me personally, I go to sleep and then I want to wake up. So playing around with architectural details that already exist that can create more visual interest and make a space look painted with intentionality makes it look more expensive. But then also just giving yourself one little feature, like maybe the ceiling or maybe an accent wall, and grabbing whatever materials are already in that room that you're staging with and saying, okay, let me repeat that color. So it's visually interesting, but it's not overboard because that color already exists. But then you also want to take it one step further and say, okay, now why would I choose that color? and ask your customers, so how do you use your bedroom? Do you want to be able to open the drapes and make it really easy for the sun to come in the morning so that it's easier for you to wake up? Or do you want a really dark bedroom that makes it easier for you to go to sleep at night? So here, this is telling me that these customers want to make it easier to wake up in the morning, and that's why they used yellow, a bright, invigorating color. If you painted that ceiling blue, it would be more relaxing. That would be somewhere that they would hang out at night and read a book and just start to just relax themselves and calm down. So if anything, even just being able to ask a customer these questions is a great way to open them up to learn more about who they are and how they like to live their lives. Hugely important one is identifying materials that are already in the home. Especially as a stager, you're not going to be ripping out a bathroom. You're not changing the countertop or the tile. You're not changing the floor. You're just wondering what color to paint this paneling. Okay. And I will never be insulted if you don't want the walls to stand out. It's okay for the walls to fade back. It's okay to just use a repeat color, because the more times you use a color, the less attention it tries to create for itself. So just, here line is so important. So that's another element of design that's here. You've got line here, line here, line here, line on the walls. So allowing that to stand out and just repeating a color that already exists in this bathroom has made this bathroom so much more relaxing. Now we know blue would be a very relaxing bathroom as well because it's a relaxing color, but the addition of a whole nother hue aside from gray will actually just kind of make it that much more interesting, which makes it that much more busy, which makes it that much more small. Okay. So understanding the materials that are already in the space is probably one of the number one things that you can do for yourself, and maybe just blend into those. So like, let's say if you had a red brick fireplace and it's staying a red brick fireplace, you're not going to paint it. If you paint your walls green, the opposite of the red brick, you are going to be highlighting the red brick against the green. So now those two colors are going to be competing against one another. But if you painted those walls around the red brick fireplace a red or an orange or a brown or maybe even like a gold, if that color already exists within the brick, then you've created more of a muted, more relaxing atmosphere, even though you're using warm colors. So the red brick isn't standing out so much. So understanding, remember, going back to the color wheel and understanding opposite and complementary colors and how they react to one another. Assessing the lighting, also really important. You're probably not going to be changing all the lighting out. So what I want you to do when you walk into your home is look up at the light bulbs that are already in the space. What color is the light that emits out of that light bulb? Okay, if it's a yellow light, then it's probably around a 2700 Kelvin. Now, yellow is going to be, I'm actually getting ahead of myself. Sorry. First, a yellow light bulb is going to mix in yellow light into your walls. So if you have a blue wall and you mix yellow into it, it's going to appear a little bit more green. But if you're looking around the house and you're noticing that the light bulbs are more of like just a stark white color, they might be more like a 4000 Kelvin light bulb. Now, if you're color mixing white into a blue room, then the color ends up actually neutralizing. It doesn't neutralize. It basically stays about the same. You're getting a really good color rendering of what that blue is going to be because you're not mixing another color into it. Versus if you look up and somebody wanted daylight bulbs and now you've got 5600 Kelvin bulbs throughout the entire house, you're actually going to enhance that blue wall. So that's electronic lighting, but also natural lighting is going to be really important because that's really also when you're going to be showing these homes. So assessing not just what the electronic lighting is, but the natural light. Is this wall facing, which direction is this wall facing? And then it really if it's so much brighter on this side of the fireplace than on this side of the fireplace, that's telling me that this whole wall over here is probably made of glass sliding doors or something like that. Okay, there's a lot of light streaming in. So right now, because of the direction of the light, they're going to get full sun on that wall, and you're going to see different variations. But at night, you're just going to turn on these tiny little pendant lights, and now each side of the fireplace is going to look exactly the same. So when you're sampling colors, try and do it, look at it throughout the day, but also look at it on one side of the room and on the other side of the room, because your color is actually going to change throughout the space. And this is also why you might have seen a color at your friend's house and gone, oh my God, I love that color. And it's beautiful in her house, but it might be completely nauseating in yours. And that's because of the color lighting that you've got there, both natural and electric. So like we measure heat versus cold, color also has its own temperature scale, and that is called Kelvin degrees. Basically, in the morning at sunrise, we're at about 2000 Kelvin. We go throughout the day. By the time the sun reaches noon, you're at around 6000 Kelvin when it reaches the hottest time of the day. Okay, so this is why you would never take a photograph of yourself at noon, but you would definitely take a photograph of yourself at sunrise or sunset when the sun is much lower and it's much redder or yellower or ambery. If we look at electronic light bulbs, they do the same thing, similar, but they don't have their own variation. They have one standard and they stay within that. So a 2700 Kelvin is going to be kind of an amberish glow. That's like your old incandescents, which they don't sell anymore. So you're really not going to be designing to those. And then there's 3000, which is white with a little yellowish tint. And then again, you've got 4000, which is white. And then you've got daylight bulbs, which are 5600, and they're very blue, really good for garages only. So just, take a look at, instead of what a light bulb is called, you might think you want daylight, you might think you want bright white, but really when you look at what color it is, just know that that's the color that it's going to be emitting and reflecting off of you and reflecting off of your walls. And it's going to affect the wall color, whether you did a white, a beige, or an actual color. When we start to talk about personal style, you're really not going to be pulling out your customers, the seller's personal style. But again, you might have to neutralize the style of the home. If it's super traditional, you might just have to soften that by modernizing it a little bit, maybe painting the trim the same color as the walls. If it's really boring, you might want to paint the ceiling kind of a lighter but opposite color of the walls, or paint the ceiling one color and then paint all the walls maybe white. Maybe just kind of add that addition to one room just to make it kind of interesting. But making things just slightly more fun or just slightly more toned back is a really good way that your new customers can come in and visualize themselves in that home with their furniture. And that's why, staging materials always kind of look the same. Again, you might not be staging with people's furniture, but sometimes you might get stuck with something that you have to work with. If you get stuck with an oriental chest or armoire, you're not going to paint the entire room red or black or gold in order to work with that chest or armoire. But you might be able to paint that room with a white that's got kind of a buttery sense to it so that it does sort of work thematically, and people who have no oriental furniture can actually visualize themselves in that space with their more modern furniture. Okay. And then there might be things that are there that you might want to work with that pretty much anybody can customize to. So playing around with colors, and even something like looking at the variations of a dish set and saying, oh, okay, well, all of those colors actually work harmoniously with one another. Maybe I can operate off of those colors rather than trying to think up 4 of my own to paint inside the space. Also looking at like the neighborhood is a good way to figure out like what colors to paint, not just your interiors, but also your exteriors. And then will there be a feature wall? Sometimes that feature wall might be your ceiling. Sometimes it might be an accent wall, maybe a darker wall behind the television, but consider how a feature wall might not just be for fun or visual interest, but it might actually impact the way that the space feels and how big it is. So a lot of people would consider the largest, most unobstructed wall in the room to be the accent wall, like this wall. And you can do that. But what I really like about this picture is that they've chosen to do a really dark cherry red on this opposite wall. Now here you've got a very long galley kitchen. If I paint the opposite wall in a cherry red, what I've done is I've added a warm color that advances onto me. So now that long, narrow room actually starts to feel more square. It actually takes this wall to the side and pushes it back so that it doesn't feel so long and narrow. The other way that you could have done that or gotten that same effect would be to paint this wall in a cooler color, a green or a blue or a violet, so that the cooler color makes those walls recede and thereby makes that room look a little less galley and hallway-like. Okay, so here just remember that you can use accents. It's not just like an interesting feature, but give it an actual functionality. So there are a lot of different resources that Benjamin Moore has to help you to choose colors. By all means, please go to your local Wallauer store and work with the interior designers there. They are design professionals who are, they're trained to work with different colors. But we also offer some other things, like there are different brochures that have an array of different colors within them and a bunch of images of what those colors look like in people's rooms. You can also google.com image a certain color. Now, if you're working in a room that has 8-foot ceilings and 2 windows, you're not going to compare the way that color looks in a room that's got 12-foot ceilings and a wall full of windows, because it's going to look different. So you're going to find a room that looks similar to the room that you're working with. There's also a color capture app in which you can photograph the actual color and it will give you different variations, and then it will also give you other colors that match it. There's also now a color portfolio app. In the color portfolio app, you can photograph the room and then you just click on the different wall spaces and you can put whatever color you want from Benjamin Moore inside of those wall spaces. That way it gives you an interesting idea of what that color is going to look like. And then you just save it and you send it on to your files or you send it on to your customer. There's also the color viewer in our software where you can actually mask out the walls of an interior or exterior space and then pop the Benjamin Moore color into it. So these are just going to take practice, having some fun. You can go back to Wallauer and say, listen, I kind of narrowed it down from 10 colors to 5 colors. Laura, can you please order me a 9x9 color chip of that color so that I can hang it up in the room? And then you've got 5 color chips that you hang around. And then you go, okay, you know what? I've actually narrowed it down to 2 or 3 different colors that I like the best. Then you're going to go back to Wallauer. You're going to buy a pint of paint for $8 and you're going to paint 2 coats of that on the wall. Use the entire pint. You can even paint it on like a 24 by 24 inch board. That way you can always keep it. But basically a pint of paint gives you enough paint to paint a door twice. Okay, so it's a lot of paint. Don't paint these tiny little squares that you've got right here. Paint something really big so that you can get a really good indication of how that color feels. Then you have to start considering paint. Right now, you've only talked about color, okay? And you really think that that is what's going on, but really paint and sheen levels are also really important. So how shiny do you want your paint? Flat, generally for ceilings, but in the staging world, some people do use it for walls. Reason being is flat, it doesn't reflect. So if there are any imperfections in the walls, then you're really not going to see them. And sometimes a flat is a little bit cheaper than its coordinate, which is matte, which has 2% more sheen and usually comes in a better quality product. Okay, so here you don't really see much reflectivity, but flats are kind of like a paper plate. All right, you can't wash a paper plate. If you put water on a paper plate, it's gonna go right through and it's gonna ruin the substrate underneath. Okay, once you start talking about semi-glosses and high glosses, now here's the same piece of trim. You can see all of the reflectivity off of all of these edges. Now we're talking more like a plastic plate. Okay, you see all the edges of the plastic plate. If you put water on it, it sits there until it evaporates away. It doesn't actually ever merge through. So that tells me that a glossy finish is very washable. Okay, but a glossy finish is going to highlight imperfections. Remember, that's what the reflectivity is. So it's not going to touch up very well, whereas a flat and matte isn't going to be nearly as durable, but it really will touch up very well. Then once you got these guys in the middle, eggshell is about as shiny as the shell of an egg. It's a great default for when people have already bought their home and they want the durability against the kids and the dogs and the washability on the walls. Pearl is about as shiny as a pearl. More washability, great for laundry rooms, bathrooms, kitchens, kids' rooms, high traffic hallways, basements, things like that. Satin, more for millwork, like your semi-gloss and your high gloss. That is about as shiny as a sheet of satin, okay? Great for when you want sort of an old historic look and you want to have durability for your cabinetry or your doors or your trim, but you don't want it to be as shiny as a semi-gloss. Generally, people will go with a satin in that regard. And then you want to purchase your paint. So there's a lot of different paint options in the paint world. When it goes back to color, these are just some of the palettes that Benjamin Moore offers. So if you go to the paint store and you feel completely confused, like why are these colors so muted and these colors are so high chroma, they're probably from different palettes. And usually the numbering system will help you to understand. If it's 1 through 1680, it's coming from the classic palette. If it's 2020-50, then it's coming from the color preview palette. So each one has its own principles, and Wallauers can actually help you with that and help you decide. Staying within one palette is a really good way to create color flow. While you're at the store, you can also grab some old color trend brochures or even new color trend brochures. So Benjamin Moore will pull out what the colors of each year are. And we do extensive travels and research in the art and design world to come to what the color of the year is going to be. And then with that, we give you a means to work with that color within the residential landscape, but also give you an entire palette to work with as well. So again, all of the brochures in the store are going to give you a nice palette to work within, but this is really what's trending for that year. But don't worry, because each year glides from one to the next. You don't really have a stark differentiation from 2016 to 2017. It basically glides so that if you did half the house one year, you could do the other half the other year with the color trends palettes. We give you, just what the influences for the year were. 2021 was great with food and gardening and shopping local. So these are the very natural tones that you see coming out of that palette. And then just an interplay of how you can merge all of those different colors together within somebody's landscape. So here you've got a very neutral home, and you can do the entire home just out of the color trends palette, just playing with the whites, the off-whites, and then just a little pop of color here and there to make it fun and visually interesting. And then you can come back to me or to Wallauer and you can talk to us about what paint product to use. Generally for stagers, I usually like to stay within the commercial grade paints, usually for the ceilings, sometimes the wall in like the back of house areas. So your contractor's only spending $25 a gallon of paint for Ultra Spec 500. You just want to clean the place up to sell it. Maybe moving into Ben, so that's your starter kit into Benjamin Moore premium zero VOC products. And then once you're dealing with the customer who wants to keep the house, then you're going to start merging into Aura for your really dark based colors, or Regal Select for your washable colors. Okay, so different products are going to give you different durability levels and qualities. Always consider the fact that when a painter is coming in to paint, oh, you want Benjamin Moore? Okay, got to charge $55 a gallon. Just because it says Benjamin Moore on the can doesn't mean that it's a $55 gallon paint. Okay, I can give you a $17 gallon of eggshell for walls. I can give you a $70 gallon of eggshell for walls, and every $5 in between. So if you want to come back to me or to Wallauer to find out whether or not it's appropriate for that space, by all means, just give us a call and we will help to guide you and to make the recommendations to the painter as per what you want, not as per what he wants. And that is it. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk to you about Wallauer, and then I will remain on the line for anybody that's got any questions. Please try and come up with some questions. Okay, we all learn from one another here.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was really, really great. I want to introduce to you Laura Nelly, and Laura is the design manager at Wallauer, and she's going to tell you all about how Wallauer can help you and your clients. Thanks, Laura.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I hope you had a great morning so far. I was drinking my coffee and listening to everything that Tony has to say, and there's a lot that has to do with color. And the good thing is that Wallauers can help you sort through all that information and find the perfect color for you or for your client. Wallauers has 15 stores in the Westchester, Putnam, Rockland area. There's one in every neighborhood with great professionals who are here to help you with everything. In addition to all of our paint stores, we do have 6 design centers that are located throughout all of Westchester. So great help is there for you when you need it, for you and your clients. Wallauer is very pleased to be partnering with you, and we're offering a perk for all of the realtors that are involved with this program today. If you are interested in giving your client a great closing gift, Wallauers is giving an incentive to you guys to purchase discounted Wallauer gift cards. If you are interested in giving that to your clients, it's a great way for them to pick up that ball after you guys have sold the house or help them buy their house, and we can help them with their design, colors, window treatments, you name it, pillows and rugs and carpeting and draperies, blinds. Everybody needs those blinds, especially in those bedrooms. So that is something that we can help you with. If you are interested in the discounted gift cards, you just have to go to the Wallauer website. You can sign up there and we will take care of that gift card. We can either send it to you or send it directly to your client in a nice little box with a note saying that it was from you. Whatever works best for you, just let us know. Our designers are here every single day except Sunday and Monday at all of our 6 stores, so we can help you and your clients with any kind of questions that you have regarding paint. Everything that Tony went over, we can help simplify it a little bit for you and zone you in on to the perfect color or the perfect window treatments or wallpaper for your clients. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to working with you. If you ever need anything, my number is on the website. Tony and I are going to be sending out some information to you tomorrow. I have my top colors that I recommend for people who are trying to get their houses ready for sale. Things that visually calm the rooms so that potential buyers can see through. So if you need anything, give me a call. I'm here all the time.
Thank you, Laura. And just a little bit more about the Wallauer perk. You all will be getting, all of our membership will be getting an e-blast shortly about that. And Wallauer is also running ads in our print edition of Real Estate in Depth, as well as online, Real Estate in Depth online. Tony, we did have a couple of questions here. Someone's asking, what if a client wants white and black?
Okay, yeah, I just saw this question. So great question. Consider that white and black, once again, is a high contrast. Even though they are colorless, white is all colors, black is no color, they are high contrast. They're very opposite one another. So even black and white, you're making a space very busy by mixing black and white. So if you use variations, 80% white, 20% black, considering all the accents that you put throughout the space, not just wall colors, then that is going to be a good, safe balance. But then what you can do is you can soften and bridge the gap between the two by adding gray. Remember, gray is, so long as it's not doesn't have too many undertones, it's just white and black that's mixed. So it bridges that gap in between and kind of softens the transition from one to the next. And then there's, the whole conversation of what whites. Are you going to be layering different whites, or are you going to just be using one kind of white? One white, if you're painting an entire house with white, then there's no layering, there's no transition, no easiness on your eyes, and it actually starts to feel a little bit institutional. So whenever you have any doubts about yourself, just Google black and white rooms interior design and click images, and it'll pull up a whole bunch of different images of what people have done, and then you can sort of gear towards what they have done. All right, so that's actually bringing me to the next question, which is somebody asked about ceilings. Another really important thing. When I was a painter, I hated doing white ceilings. If people just wanted the most easygoing, traditional sort of look, I painted the ceilings the same color as the crown molding and the doors and trim. That way the crown molding just sort of gravitated right into the ceiling. Now the ceiling is flat and the crown molding was semi-gloss. So there is a differentiation in sheen, but it just made the transition easy on your eyes. But people underestimate just how much light reflects off of white, okay? Especially a white ceiling, because the white ceiling, a ceiling is the largest, most unobstructed surface in an entire room, okay? You might have a ceiling fan, and that would be the only thing that obstructs it versus the equal size if you've got an entire dining room table. So there's a lot more going on the floor. So full white ceilings reflect so much light that they actually can draw your eye right up to them, especially if you've got a darker color on the wall. So I usually like to darken the ceiling a little bit, especially if there's crown molding and you've got white crown molding all over. If you just darken the ceiling a little bit, maybe add the tiniest bit of the wall color into the ceiling paint, then there's a smaller variation, and that actually really punches your crown molding out a lot more. Okay, so you can talk to the store about doing a quarter of the formula into the ceiling paint, or like an eighth of the formula into whatever the ceiling paint is going to be. Try to stay away from ceiling white if you can. I'd rather you just get like a cheaper white flat paint than getting the paint that's called ceiling white, because it's kind of gray. And if you're doing Chantilly lace trim throughout the entire home, then do Chantilly lace on the ceiling. That'll make your life easier. But if you want something visually interesting, then don't be afraid to go with a really dark ceiling. Also, Google this, or take a look at restaurants or offices around you. Sometimes they've got dark navy or black ceilings, especially in restaurants. What it does is if they've got a lot of piping and everything throughout the ceiling, it masks everything. And it actually just kind of makes it disappear. People always think that a really dark color is going to be looming on top of you and make a space feel really small, but actually it can give infinite space to a wall or to a ceiling. So it can actually make it feel a little bit larger sometimes. So consider variations of slightly off-white colors, but always keep it somehow within the color scheme if you can. And again, just Google image everything because somebody has done it somewhere. Yeah. Please provide apps and websites. In the email that Laura and I send out, I will definitely let you know. But yeah, anytime that you just go into your app store on your phone and type in Benjamin Moore, it will pull up all of the different apps that we do have there. What's the best white for displaying artwork? That kind of depends on what the artwork is, as well as what is the border, the matting around the artwork. I could give you, the whitest of whites that we've got, but if you've got yellowy linen white matting around your artwork, the whitest of whites isn't really going to work. So it really depends again on what is in those pre-existing elements. If you want to go as white can be, then consider Chantilly lace, OC65. If you want to go as one of the other most white colors, not necessarily the cleanest, but one of the brightest, we've got brilliant white and we've got super white. Those are also nice and brilliant. Then we've also got simply white. That's got a little bit, it's very clean, but it's got a little bit more of a yellowish cast to it. Okay. But for you guys and for making your painters happy, I would stay away in staging. I would stay away from Chantilly lace and simply white. Okay. Because they're so bright, because there's so little pigment that we put into them, that they don't hide very well. So to be able to cover in one coat, not going to happen ever. You're lucky sometimes if you cover in 2 coats, even in a premium product. And that's just the nature of such clean white colors. So I would probably bounce around super white, make your contractor as happy as possible, and consider that one. Let's see if there are any other questions. White ceilings hide the vent grill and other odd shapes that are mounted onto the ceiling. Do you then paint those grills and light bezels to match the ceiling so they disappear? So as a former painter, my rule of thumb was, if it has already been painted, whether it's a light switch or a vent in the ceiling, if it's already been painted, I am repainting it. And like radiators, if it hasn't already been painted, I am probably not going to repaint it or paint it. If it's in really bad condition and it would look so much better painted, I have to assess why it would look so much better painted. If it's a rusted air vent grill, tell the customer to change it out. There's no amount of paint that you could put on rust to make it stick and to make it cover. It's always going to bleed through. So you'll have to remove the rust, you'll have to prime it properly, and then you'll have to paint it. Totally not worth all of it. Let's say if it's a water stain in the ceiling, you're going to have to clean it. You're going to have to prime it with a stain sealant primer, because it will always come through it will always go through what do you call it? It will always go through a latex paint. So clean it, stain sealant, prime it, and then paint over it. So try to avoid painting things or caulking things to a ceiling or to a wall if you can. If it's already been done, just go for it. Gotta sign off. Okay, that's it in terms of questions in the chat. If you've got a question, you want to pop it into the chat, or you want to just unmute yourself and ask, I am still here for you.
In the meantime, Tony, I just want to thank you again. It was so interesting learning about all these different things and getting some great ideas, for different rooms and just the way things are decorated. And I think it's really going to be so helpful for our realtors, because, new homeowners, maybe they're moving into a place that needs a little TLC and they're overwhelmed and they don't know where to start, what to do. So I think that, you've really given them some great information to go on.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's Arlene. Wanted to ask again regarding ceilings. If you can reiterate, you were saying that it's best to paint the crown molding the same color of the ceiling. What about the same color of the walls in the room?
Okay, so the crown molding is going to be painted the same color and the same paint as all of the molding. Okay, your painter is going to come in, he's going to do 1 or 2 coats of a semi-gloss on all of the molding. The trim and the door is the same exact thing. You can use the same color in a flat on the ceiling in order to not highlight the ceiling even more. Because even 2 whites that are very similar to one another will still stand out from one another. So it just is easy on your eye to not see a differentiation. You had another question that I didn't answer, and I forgot what the question was.
No, it was weekend. I was asking if we should paint the ceiling. What about painting the ceiling the same color as the walls in the room and differentiating the crown molding as the white? What does that? Does it cut off the room as the white semi-gloss? If you did the crown molding. Yeah.
So what painting the walls and the ceilings can do in a same color in a room is it makes that room feel more cave-like. And sometimes if you've got a room that's got like pitched ceilings, it sort of makes sense because maybe the walls only start at like 3 feet or 4 feet. But generally speaking, if you have the same wall paint going into the ceiling paint, then you are going to feel more cave-like, especially the darker the color actually is. Now, also consider what the lighting in the room is. If you've got lamps on the ground and the lamps are pointing up at the ceiling, then their ceiling will be brighter. But if you've got hi-hats where the lights are pointing down out of the ceiling, then the ceiling will be darker. So even if I do the same exact color on the walls into the ceilings, the ceiling will look darker if the lighting is pointing down out of it. So that's why you also want to sample colors on the ceiling by actually putting them up on the ceiling. So I wouldn't suggest doing the walls and the ceilings in the same exact color. But if you want them to sort of reflect off of one another and you want to highlight the crown molding, like let's say you've got some really nice crown molding, don't do it to like some tiny little cold molding. If you've got nice, big, juicy crown molding, then let's say you did a beige on the walls. You can also ask to have a quarter or an eighth of the formula. Like, let's go with a quarter of the formula of the beige and ask them to tint that into the ceiling paint so that it kind of reflects the walls, but not entirely. It's still significantly lighter than the walls. And that will make your brilliant white crown molding look even whiter. Okay, so that'll really make it kind of stand out.
So you can ask for your Wallauer paint guy to make that ceiling paint with only 25% pigment in it. So they're going to take the base and they're only going to put 25% of the color in instead of 100% of the color. So you're still going to get that same color, but it's going to be quite paler and it'll correspond to your walls perfectly.
Thank you, Laura. Better
That's good.
said.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything? All righty. Well, listen, thank you both again. And we are recording this and we'll be sending this out either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And you'll also be getting, I think, Tony, you said you're going to put something else together and we'll just put it all in one package and we'll send it out. So,
Yes.
but thank you to both of you, Tony and Laura, and thank you all for coming today. It was really, really interesting. And everyone go out and have a wonderful, colorful day. How about that? Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.